Greetings to all. I'm going to be talking about an eminent woman who in Jewish history faced tremendous amount of obstacles. There is not going to be a PowerPoint, which I know that nowadays everybody's used to, but I have very good reason for it. We really don't have any documents, any writings by Doña Gracia, as much as I would love to have had something to read from that she had written. What I can show you, and you can see you can see on the screen, it can be shown that there is a book called La Signora in Hebrew, which was written by a student of mine, Naomi Keren. And in this book, Naomi, who wrote a paper, major paper about Doña Gracia, decided to create letters that she supposedly wrote in a full correspondence. It's a large book, but it's all imaginary. So I also do want to mention something else that I know some of you might have actually read, Naomi Reagan's book, The Ghost of Hannah Mendes, which is supposed to tell the story of her granddaughter and her great-granddaughter and so on and so forth. And in it, the opening scene is factually incorrect. Doña Gracia was born in 1510 in Portugal, whereas Naomi Reagan had her already crossing over the border in 1492 and being traumatized. So please knock that out of your minds if you've actually read the book. So we have here a young woman born in Portugal, but of a family that did come from Spain, from the Nasi family. She's often called Doña Gracia Nasi. She was born as a Christian because in 1497 all of the Jews in Portugal were forced to convert to Catholicism, and was given the name Beatriz de Luna, even though even though she might have was presumably a crypto Jew, a hidden Jew, and observing Judaism. We know next to nothing about her childhood. But we do know that at the age of 18, in 1528, she married Francisco Mendes from the Benveniste family, also a family that had come from Spain, and had forcibly converted in 1497. So we've got a marriage contract that's a Portuguese marriage contract, which will come into play. He is from an eminent family. He managed a bank in Lisbon that dealt with precious stones, spices, and he worked with his brother Diogo. His brother Diogo was actually sent over into Antwerp in 1512 to develop contacts and deal with spices, peppers, and work with the Portuguese king. Antwerp was a commercial center considered to be the capital of Northern Europe commercially, so it was a wise decision. And we've got her living with her husband in 1534, giving birth to a daughter. And we have these dual names for them, sometimes Hebrew names like Renée, Brianda being a Spanish-Portuguese name. And Brianda's born in 1534. Unfortunately, her father dies the year later in 1535. He leaves a will. Coming from a wealthy family, he had taken care to have a serious will. It's interesting because Portuguese wills usually live half to the widow and half to the children. Because he was in business with his brother, he left half to his brother, and the other half of the estate was to the women in his family, which meant that half would be to Doña Gracia. So it's a quarter of the estate, but half of what was really legally his, and almost all of that other half to the daughter, sort of 2/3 of it, the rest were for expenses. Now, what we see is, first obstacle, we've got a young widow who has to figure out how she's going to deal with the family business. We don't know if he included her. I sort of tend to think that he probably did. And what we see is that Doña Gracia, throughout her entire life, she's an upper-class woman who is socializing also with the upper class. And the king of Portugal, João, had paid attention to the fact that Francisco had passed away. And he was very anxious to process an inventory of the assets. And Doña Gracia tries to delay this. She would like to get as much of the money of the family out of Portugal as she can to keep the king's fingers off this. And the king suggests that she brings her daughter, who is really just a little girl, bring her to the queen, to the court, to be brought up by the Her Royal Highness, so that the queen could choose a husband for her. This husband would be an old Christian, obviously, and if they are new Christians of the conversos, we're talking about a threat to continuing to observe Judaism secretly, if indeed they were doing that, and we sort of assume that she was doing that. And also, they would choose the husband for her, and this husband would be beholden to the king and the queen, and obviously start giving gifts to the king from the family, from the Doña Gracia's family. We're talking about control, about forfeiting an inheritance, about losing her daughter to the Catholic world. This is a major threat, and how does again, a young woman in her 20s, I mean, her husband dies, she's 25 years old. And how is she going to deal with these type of threats without angering the king and the queen, without having them think of possibly taking revenge on her? But she also knows, and those of us who study Spanish and Portuguese history know that while there had been an inquisition in Spain, there was no inquisition in Portugal after the conversion of the Jews, because the king knew that it would not be terribly wise to start investigating their Jewishness when they were Jews yesterday, and how could they become good Catholics today. But in the 1500s, we have quite a lot of members of the church and the court who are interested in establishing a Portuguese Inquisition. They're actually going to the Pope. There are lobbies there begging for an Inquisition. And here we have 1535, her husband dies. 1536, the Portuguese Inquisition is established. So this is a good time to leave town. And Doña Gracia decides that she's going to eventually get to Antwerp, which is under Spanish control, so that it's not exactly getting out of getting out from under the Spanish, Portuguese world and kingdoms, but her brother-in-law is sitting there, so it certainly makes sense, because he's got half of the family of the family assets, and she's got the other half. And she decides, and she does leave. In 1536, she makes a stop in England so that it will look as though she's not running off somewhere suspicious. She takes, of course, her daughter with her, and also her sister, whose name is Brianda. So notice that her daughter's name is Brianda, and her sister's name is Brianda, and we have this Sephardic tendency of giving names of the living. When her sister gets married, she's going to name her daughter Gracia. So it gets very confusing they have the senior and the junior. They don't use those terms. They use la grande and la pequeña or la chica. But the sister is named Brianda. Sister is single, so a younger sister. And she also takes with her two nephews, Samuel and João, or who will be later known as Joseph Hanassi, because being from the Nassi family. So she takes this. Her entourage is herself, her daughter, her sister, and these two nephews. And what's interesting is that, and I go back 5 years, Francisco, while he was alive, knew that someone might be after them because they're so wealthy, and possibly try to bring them to trial, to an Inquisition trial, because at the end, if you are found guilty, they confiscate your belongings, at least for the years when you were a heretic. And Francisco had actually, and I say in quotes, bought defense from the Pope, from Clement VII at the time, which was to guarantee him no accusations of heresy against him or his family, which is unbelievable if you think about it. What we're talking about is a major bribe. I mean, we don't know how much money he paid the Pope, but tremendous amount of money to say that no one in the family would be brought before the Inquisition when they were crypto Jews. They were, they were clearly tied to their Jewish heritage. And we have this information, interestingly enough, not from the papacy, but from letters between the Portuguese king and Charles V, who was the Emperor of Holland, and the sister, and back and forth, where they know that this family has gotten, protection. It's protection money. That's basically what it is. But unfortunately, once somehow in Antwerp, this didn't seem to do the trick. And there are all sorts of inquisitorial spies and various informers, competitors, because we also have a wealthy family that is getting into certain fields that other merchants are not so, or merchants and or bankers are not interested in having competition. They're greedy, and they figure that this is a family that's a new Christian family that had been forcibly converted in 1497. So why not provide information on them as being Judaizers, as being secret Jews, and this way they might possibly end up ruining their business. Diogo, the brother-in-law of Doña Gracia, is arrested while his brother is still alive, and while this supposedly has this defense, in 1532. The trial there is quite amazing. It's a trial with 15 counts of heresies or problems, including the fact that he was observing Judaism, but in addition that he had a monopoly on spices. So we hear that the merchant's greed is right there, helping new Christians getting out to the Ottoman Empire. What is the solution here? The solution is to pay a fine, which is interesting, a fine of 50,000 ducats, a tremendous amount of money, to Charles V, the Emperor of Holland, and he called it an interest-free loan. He knew he was never going to get this money back, but at least he wasn't in prison, and he's freed. When Doña Gracia gets there, when her brother-in-law organized what I would call an underground for conversos to help them flee Portugal and Spain. And it's an amazing setup, just like the underground that we had of the slaves, the black slaves in the South in the 19th century. They helped them emigrate, they helped them relocate, whether it be to France, Italy, Turkey, even to the land of Israel. And they have then these various conversos become extremely loyal to the family and serve as agents for them. So they also have agents located throughout Europe and the Ottoman Empire, which will serve them well afterwards. They are able then to try to protect their own assets. They spread their wealth through these different countries. And in the meantime, Diogo decides that he'll marry, and who does he choose to marry? None other than Brianda, Doña Gracia's sister. So this is a perfect way to keep all the money in the family. She gives birth to a daughter. The daughter, as I already intimated, is named none other than Gracia la Chica. She's born in 1540, a year after the marriage. Doña Gracia is not happy about sitting in a place where the Inquisition, because, as I said, it's under Spanish rule, the Inquisition can take place, and she says to Diogo, let's get out of here. Let's leave. There are too many religious fanatics here. There are too many competitors. And in the 1540s, she plans to leave. Unfortunately, neither of their husbands had long lives, and he dies in 1543 before they're able to actually leave. In Diogo's will, he leaves his wife her dowry and some property. He leaves his daughter, Gracia la Chica, his half of the family assets, but until he's 18, Doña Gracia is the guardian. So she becomes the executrix of an amazing empire. It is clear that he trusted her completely, and I don't know if he didn't trust his wife, or he just felt that she wasn't as savvy as his sister-in-law was, and the two of them had worked extremely well together. They were wonderful partners, and they really did well. So we have sort of almost a deja vu here that in 1544, right after he dies, the crown is trying to wed to wed Doña Gracia's daughter to a Catholic nobleman. He's imitating more or less what the Portuguese king was trying to do. Again, she's socializing with high society in Antwerp as well. She realizes it's time to go. Things are too difficult here. She sends her nephews on a trip to Europe. It's sort of a trip to check things out, to survey the land, to make contacts. Let's go. Meanwhile, the inquisitors say, wait a minute, Diogo is dead, but we're allowed to have trials post-mortem. We can have them in absentia when someone is gone, we can have them when they're present, and we can have them post-mortem. So they decide that they organize an Inquisition trial to try him as a heretic. Doña Gracia fights it, and the compromise is, once again, a large loan to the emperor, because I guess the emperor figured that this way he would have directly to him rather than to the Inquisition. In 1545, a year following this attempt to wed her daughter, Doña Gracia says, okay, we're going to go to France, to the springs, with my sister and the girls. Let's go and, on a vacation there. They had on their entourage huge trunks of clothing and their property and whatnot, and they have no intention of coming back. They decided they must get out. So we see, again, the danger of inquisition in Portugal and a possible marital problem with the daughter. Same thing, problem with the marital suggestion or pressure by the crown, and also the Inquisition has already twice been after Diogo, and why not go after Doña Gracia as well? So they continue on to Venice. Now, they choose Italy. Italy doesn't exist. Italy is made up of city-states, and each city-state, or Venice is actually a republic, has its own setup. So they get to Venice, and they start trials in Antwerp against Doña Gracia in absentia. So I said it can be when you're not there, and it can be when you're post-mortem, when you're dead. There's a no-show on Doña Gracia's part. They confiscate her property that she's left in Antwerp because she cannot take everything with them when she's supposedly just going on vacation to the springs. She leaves her nephews there. Her nephew, João, remains and contests this. He claims that they are Portuguese citizens, so this is illegal because you're the Spanish Inquisition. The emperor is looking for more money. João Joseph offers another loan. The emperor is greedier. He's not satisfied with this. And the nephew both nephews mysteriously disappear with part of the fortune, leaving part of it behind. They knew that this was a risk that they were going to take, that they must get out of the rule of Iberia, whether it be Spain or Portugal. And they get, like I said, they're in Venice in 1545. It's a major port, so that's clearly a decision that she's made, thinking that she can then do trade from there. It's tremendous trade with the Ottoman Empire. But as you might know, Venice is famous for the ghettos, which are established in 1516 for Levantine Jews. Okay, so Jews are coming over from Turkey, and they're often doing trade, but they want to live there, and they keep them in a ghetto, which is an iron foundry. What is she going to do? Is she going to go and live in a ghetto with the Jews and become a Jew, where she's been living as a Christian up until now? Is she going to continue her facade? Well, she's not going to go live in the ghetto. They have a curfew. It's not for her. She prefers to behave as a Christian. She is still Beatriz de Luna. We call her Doña Gracia, but she is still Beatriz de Luna. And I should say that the Republic of Venice actually has its own inquisition. It's for heretics. It doesn't have a jail. It doesn't have a torture chamber. There are many who were considered to be Judaizers, observing Judaism secretly, or reported to be, but in the history of the Venetian Inquisition, there are only 3 trials of Judaizers, so it's not a terribly major threat for her pretending to be a Christian while she is probably a secret Jew. What develops there is interesting, tensions within the family. Now, I mentioned that her sister, the widow of Diogo, the brother-in-law, has gotten, and she's really inherited a very small amount, a small portion of the assets, and she resents her sister's exclusive control. She is seeking money, she's seeking control, and what she does, or what she purported to have done, is very odd. She decides to tell one of their agents, who was a Christian, that they're planning to tie up their affairs and go to Turkey to live as Jews. This agent thinks, oh, wow, this is amazing information I have. I mean, what I can do with this. I bet that if I double-cross this family and report them, and they confiscate their property, I bet I'll get some lovely payment from the Inquisition that will be much better than whatever this sister, who isn't very wealthy, might be able to pay me. So he does that. He double-crosses them. And the church takes the two girls, the two daughters, the little Beatrice and little Grazia, to a nunnery and arrests both of the sisters. They're reported as Judaizers, and this incident comes to the attention of the Sultan, who has heard that Doña Gracia, that Beatriz de Luna is thinking of coming, and we're talking about a major asset if she comes there. It comes to his attention through the court Jew there, a fellow named Moshe Hamon, who wanted a match for his son with Doña Gracia's daughter, which is why he basically decides to intercede here. And the rumors are flying that the Sultan is going to show up in Venice. Doña Gracia is miraculously released from prison with her daughter, and she's invited to Ferrara. Now, Ferrara is it's a city-state. It's a city-state west of Venice, and not a port, but there is a Jewish community there, and there is a community of conversos, of who maybe haven't decided to become Jews or not, or have decided to become Jews, and the Duke of Ferrara is okay with this, has given them permission, as long as they can improve his financial state of the city. And in 1548, she gets an invitation, 48 or 49, with a promise of safe conduct, meaning that going from Venice to Ferrara, he would be in charge of her, and that she could, if she wants, have a synagogue in her home. Her sister somehow joins her, and this is a little sort of confusing to some of us because you think that she would have been really annoyed with her sister. I do have a colleague who's a scholar of Italian Jewry, Howard Adelman, who thinks that this was sort of planned, this whole thing, that the two of them really did it in cahoots, and not 100% sure why, but perhaps. At any rate, her sister comes, and the representatives of the Sultan actually show up in Venice to arrange her affairs, anything that was left there. So she's already got these contacts from Istanbul. How is she living in in Ferrara? It's really, your guess is as good as mine. We have those who testify. One of her agents, Duarte Gomez, a few years later was brought into the Inquisition. It was tried because he himself was also of converso background. And he testified that she was a Christian. There are others say that she did have a synagogue in her house. We honestly don't know. I mean, there are proclivities towards one direction as well as the other. In 1551, okay, this is like 3 years they've been there, there's a threat of a plague in Ferrara, and Doña Gracia is not going to wait around and see what happens, and she goes to Venice where she's arrested again. She flees back to Ferrara, and then she decides, I've had enough of Italy between the plagues here and between the Inquisitions and between not knowing what's going on. And she decides that now she is, in 1552, she is 42 years old, and she decides it's time to go to Turkey where I can actually live as a Jew. She's had enough of these difficulties. She passes through Ragusa. Ragusa is Dubrovnik in southern Croatia. We know that because a colleague of mine at Bar Ilan, Moshe Orfali, actually found information about the time that she was in Ragusa, a short time. She gets a warm welcome. She's highly esteemed. Ragusa, Dubrovnik is the gateway to the east. They need Jewish crafts. They are happy to have trading networks there and grain going from the east to the west, and she sets up amazing ties there. She has large quantities of merchandise, and in Ragusa there are storage areas that are going to serve her extremely well. She has 2 local agents there and her own agent that comes with her. They're transporting wool, spices, grain, and pepper to Italy and Venice from the east, and the textiles such as wool and linen to the Ottoman Empire in exchange for raw materials. She makes deals par excellence. She has immunity. She has discussed that she's not going to be paying customs taxes for a number of years. Exemptions, special conditions. She agrees that and promises that she's going to use Ragusa as her port coming from the Ottoman Empire for a number of years, and she renews this, these contracts time and again. She gets discounts. She's also taking risks because she's sort of putting all of her eggs in one basket, but she transfers funds to them. It's a sense she's giving them securities, and she is contributing to the economic development of the Mediterranean region. So we have her in 1552 coming through Ragusa, heading towards Turkey or the Ottoman Empire then, and in 1553 she finally overcomes all of these major obstacles of whether it be inquisition and matches for her daughters, etc. And she enters there literally like a queen. I mean, we happen to have chronicles, contemporary chronicles. They say that she came in with 40 armed horsemen, 4 magnificent coaches, and so on and so forth. Of course, everything is prearranged. The customs, she's not stopped at the port. This is a major figure coming into Constantinople, which is a European exclusive suburb, where we're now during the rule of Suleiman I, Suleiman the Great, the Magnificent. So we've got this magnificent woman coming in under the rule of the magnificent Sultan. She gets there and she immediately becomes a Jewish patroness. She supports scholars, rabbis, published works. She has the Bible translated into Spanish, and she subsidizes, she pays for this, and this is the Ferrara Bible. It comes out in 1553, and it's very interesting. It has it comes out in 2 editions. One edition is dedicated to the Duke of Ferrara, and this is intended to go to Iberia, and one of them is dedicated to Doña Gracia. We also have a well-known book by Samuel Usque, who was a Portuguese Jew, The Consolation for the Tribulations of Israel, which is a long prose poem in Portuguese about the history of the Jewish people, especially their sufferings, with promises of hope and chronicles of martyrs. And this is to inspire crypto-Jews, because she is, even though she's become a Jew, she is tied to her converso background. She is still running her underground railroad, so to speak, and still helping them flee, usually through the Pyrenees, through France, to Italy, and some also coming to join her in the Ottoman Empire. What's interesting, and she is that her husband had, her last request was to be buried in Jerusalem, and she manages to get his bones out of Portugal and have them buried in Jerusalem. She is supporting the building, their hospitals is called the Doña Gracia Hospital in Istanbul, in Constantinople, the synagogue of La Signora, schools, scholars, and yeshivot, all named for her because she is just a major, major philanthropist. What happens now is actually a well-known incident in the history of the conversos who move out of Portugal and Spain. Many of them decided that they wanted to come to Italy, and they looked for a place, for a port, because so many of them were businessmen and merchants and traders, and ports were the best place for them to be rather than inland. And a group of them come in the 1550s, and they go to Ancona, which is, again, an eastern port facing the Ottoman Empire. And an agreement is made there with the head of Ancona, and he says it's going to be a free port for the conversos. As long as you can revive our trade, as long as you can improve everything economically, then I promise you, you are going to be safe here. This can be a refuge for the new Christians. And if for some reason there's a rumor that maybe the Inquisition is going to come to town, and remember, the Inquisition is based in Rome. It's the Pope has to give approval for every inquisition, whether it be in Spain, whether it be in Portugal, whether it be in Antwerp, and certainly in Italy. Okay, again, not in Venice, because Venice has its own republic and it works independently. But we've got a Pope sitting in Rome, and it's quite possible that a Pope might decide that he wants to go after these former Catholics who have been baptized, who are now outward Jews. And he promises, I will warn you if anything happens. Unfortunately, he cannot keep his promise. The new pope in 1555 is Pope Paul IV, a well-known fanatic and anti-Semite par excellence. And he sends a group of his inquisitorial staff to Ancona in 1555, literally in the middle of the night, arresting 100 conversos there, now Jews, who are living there. Sets up an inquisitorial court in Ancona, literally, again, overnight. They didn't have a very good prison there. We know that 40 of them managed to flee, but there are still close to 60 of them there. And the following year, in 1556, there's a trial. As a result of the trial, 38 of them are reconciled to the church. In other words, they had the choice to renounce their Judaism and become good Catholics, or to be put at the stake, to be killed at the stake. 24 of them are burned at an auto da fe in Ancona. Doña Gracia hears about this. She is completely outraged. She approaches the Sultan. She says, you have to speak up, you have to help me here. She's planning revenge. Her revenge is amazingly creative. She plans a boycott of the port of Pesaro. She plans to organize Jewish solidarity. She turns to Jewish merchants all over, to rabbis and to scholars, and she says to them, you must insist that no one uses Ancona as a port anymore. And this is what we'll do. We'll set up an alternate. You've got to send your merchandise somewhere. It has to reach the next stop. So we'll go to Pesaro. Now, Pesaro was a smaller city, a little bit north of Ancona, not really set up to be a large port, but she thought that maybe they could build it up. And the head of Pesaro said, okay, you know what? If you can make out my port better, we'll let the conversos come here. She is not getting backing, 100% backing from all those to whom she turns. She is still forging ahead. She calls a rabbinic conference, and she says, I need you to put a cherem, to put a ban on anyone who uses Ancona as a port, because look what they did. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. so well, Pesaro isn't functioning so well, and a lot of the Italian Jews are afraid that somehow it's going to backfire, that somehow they're going to end up suffering if they do something like this. And in 1558, those new Christians, those former Jews, those former Christians who are now Jews in Pesaro are being expelled. If you think about this, this is an amazing plan, an amazing idea, an initiative, this illusion, which ends up to be an illusion, but the idea to have Jewish world solidarity is phenomenal. It doesn't succeed, but the thought is really quite impressive. In the meantime, we've still got some other difficulties and obstacles because she had come to Istanbul with her, she had come with her daughter and her son-in-law. Her son-in-law now was her niece. Her nephew. Her son-in-law was her nephew, Yosef, who's now going by as Joseph Nasi. Her niece had stayed in Ferrara with her nephew, Samuel, and they got married. Again, keep everything in the family there. But there are two of the family agents in Ferrara have been imprisoned, and she realizes this is terribly dangerous, this threat of an inquisition starting in Ferrara. She goes to the Sultan with a request. He denies it. I don't want to get involved with Ferrara. But she pushes and pushes and pushes and sends, and probably bribed, and sends bribes as well. And in 1558, just before the Inquisition begins trials there, she manages to get to move her niece and her nephew out of Ferrara to join them in the Ottoman Empire. Another obstacle that she faces is with rabbinic controversy in the Ottoman Empire, because her sister Brianda is never happy. She's still angry about the fact that she has to wait, that her daughter isn't going to get anything till she's 18, and she got so little, and she goes to the rabbis and she says, look at this. This is all that was done under Gentile law, and we're Jews now. So shouldn't this be other than what it is? I think that I should, as a widow, have control of my daughter's inheritance. What's very interesting is that there was research done on this and finding rabbinic decisions. Most of the rabbis said, look, Dina de Malchuta Dina, the law of the land is the law, and these contracts and these wills were made as Christians, they were living as Christians, and therefore they are valid there. There was only one rabbi on her sister's side of Joseph Caro, who said, wives do not inherit. And therefore, this doesn't work, it's not applicable, but she manages to overcome that and maintains her all of her assets all along, continually. Her next plan is to come to the land of Israel. And this is, again, also quite impressive. We are in the 16th century, and this woman who is born in Portugal, has gone through, lived in Antwerp, lived in Ferrara, lived in short while in Venice, now living in the Ottoman Empire. Granted, the Sultan has control of the land of Israel now, so it's perfectly opportune for her to start thinking about approaching this area, but she has ideas that are really striking. She says, you know what, I think I'm ready to move to Israel. My husband's bones are in Jerusalem. I don't want to live in Jerusalem. I think the ideal place for me to go would be to Tiberias. Now, Tiberias at this point is not so inviting. It has potential. And this is what Doña Gracia sees. She sees that it can be something amazing. And what does she do? First thing she does is she buys a contract. In Turkish, it's called a firman. She goes to the Sultan in 1558, and she says, how about giving me a contract so that I can be in charge of Tiberias? And by being in charge of Tiberias, she meant that that any taxes would come to her because she has paid already a nice amount of money to the Sultan. She gets permission from him to create a new independent Jewish settlement. She says we have to plant palm trees there. We have to plant sugar cane because she has checked out the topography and the geography and the land, you know, what's appropriate to grow there. In addition to sugar cane, berries, and silk. She realizes that the silk industry would be ideal for this particular location. Excuse me. She sends over workers to repair the baths that were there because there'd been a lot of destruction over the years between whether it be Crusaders or whether it be Bedouins in the area. She sends over workers to improve the springs and to build a synagogue. In addition, she realizes that everything has to be protected. So she has a wall built around Tiberias, and she sends soldiers to Tiberias to protect everything. This, as a result, creates messianic fervor in the area of the Jews of Sfat, who were anyway, they were inclined towards messianism and mysticism, and the Jews are preparing for her arrival. Unfortunately, she dies in 1569, and she never makes it there. But again, if we think about it, this is a woman with superb vision on so many levels. She manages a project, she manages the family assets from a young age as being a young widow. She saves most of the family property that was in danger. She had to leave some in Portugal, she had to leave some in Antwerp, but the majority of it she does save. She also manages to extricate hundreds of converted Jews or children, or children of converted Jews, crypto Jews, or new Christians out of Spain and Portugal, so that they can join Jewish communities or create their own new Christian Jewish communities. She is unbelievably generous, as we can see from the fact that she has built so many Jewish institutions. And she becomes a full-fledged Jewish philanthropist almost overnight, never having lived in a serious Jewish community. Keep this in mind. This woman was born as a Christian, baptized as a Christian in 1510, this child. And then still she has to live pretending to be Christian until she leaves Portugal. While she's in Antwerp, she still has to. While she's in Venice, she still has to. Ferrara, we don't know. But she becomes this amazingly generous philanthropist. She has a brilliant strategy after what happens in Ancona. Economic boycott to punish anti-Semitism. She has a sense of vision to build a Jewish homeland with self-governing population there, with a Jewish majority in Tiberias, with a realistic economy based on agriculture, industry, and export. Again, I look again at the challenges that this woman faced from 1535, when she's a widow, 25-year-old widow with a 1-year-old baby. She has to deal with the crown eyeing her fortune and the family fortune and the daughter's inheritance. And actually, while I'm doing this, I can show you, well, this is, the family tree is only partial, but I can also show you, this is a chronology of her life, of which most of the points I have touched on, so if anybody wants to sit and read it per se. She has, the Inquisition is en route, is following her wherever she is. 3 trials in Antwerp, 2 against her brother-in-law and 1 against her. She has to flee. Is Antwerp safe when she gets there? No, despite the fact that her husband had bought protection. She has threats all the time, whether it be religious from the Inquisition, whether it be economic by those with whom she was competing. She spreads her fortune to avoid disasters so that if she has to move, if she has to make a sudden move overnight, she is not going to be bankrupt. The family is still going to manage fine. She has an advantage. She has an advantage of wealth. She has an advantage that she is a widow and she can make her own decisions. I don't want to, belittle those. And she had a partner for a short while of Diogo, and she has another advantage. She's obviously got brains. She's extremely talented. She flees Venice. She goes there. She flees to Venice. She gets there's a Christian. She's put in prison. She flees to Ferrara. She faces a plague, which she flees, arrested again in Venice. She has this foresight that we see of preparing ahead, of seeking security. She has amazing courage to try to take revenge on Ancona, which she's basically taking revenge against the Pope. I mean, no one less than a Pope, that she's taking revenge upon him, seeking solidarity. She's defeated, but the fact that she tries it shows just how strong she was. She saves her niece and nephew from Ferrara. She has to fight her sister. I mean, her sister is obviously a problematic sibling there twice. Once in Venice, and she ends up in prison, and once regarding the will and her rights. And she thinks about how to survive. How can the Jewish people survive in the land of Israel with a realistic preparation? So I hope that you have seen that while we have, the first book, Doña Gracia, which was Cecil Roth, the very well-known historian in the 50s and the 60s of the Jews of Italy, Doña Gracia of the House of Nasi. He also wrote a book about her nephew, Yosef, and he gives him way more credit than he should have, because Doña Gracia is the brains behind all the ideas. But we see a woman who is born into a difficult life, born into a life as a new Christian in a country of Portugal that's about to establish an inquisition, and how she overcomes time after time. Again, it helped that she had wealth, but she used her wealth wisely, and not only egotistically or egocentrically, but she was extremely generous and extremely wise in the way that she helps to plan her life, the life of her family, saving everyone, ending up in the Ottoman Empire, and passing away there, never living her dream of going to the land of Israel, but having overcome enormous amount of challenges. So thank you.